Hello, hello. Sorry about the little bit of a delay. We're having some technical difficulties with my camera today. So we're having to use the not good camera. I don't know why my camera's not connecting, but it's always something. But we're excited to be back today with Dr. Susan. We're going to be talking about different relationship and sibling issues that come up in the home when one or more of your kids has a neurodevelopment or other disabling condition that can just complicate some of those relationships. So I'm excited to get into this with Dr. Susan. She is a wealth of knowledge. And so, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and run the intro and then we'll bring Susan on and we will just get right into it. So, if I can find the intro, there we go.
Hi, I'm Nicole, and as you have probably guessed, I have ADHD. I live and breathe all things ADHD in my personal, family, and professional life. I have a background in psychology and special education, and I've gained a lot of knowledge over the years about ADHD, what it really is, how it touches every aspect of your life and the life of your child, as well as a wealth of information and strategies for living with ADHD and parenting kids with ADHD. In this community, we share stories, we learn together, and we support each other as we navigate all things ADHD. Welcome.
Hello, my friend.
So good to see you again, Nicole.
How are you doing?
I am doing absolutely wonderful.
Awesome.
I
You back
attended
home?
Amazing training conference last week on improving my speaking skills, which I will use in this podcast.
Excellent. You got any good tips for me? Send them my way.
Absolutely. We should talk about this.
Yeah. So, let's just jump right in. This is a topic you brought to the table because you've been seeing some things come up. So,
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of directions we could go with it, but let's start with what were you thinking?
Well, it's been coming up in my parent support group, Parents of Twice Exceptional Children, that their children are complaining that there's a real imbalance between the amount of attention they're giving their neurodivergent child or children and their neurotypical children. And families are really struggling with how to balance this out. And
Sure.
they don't always like the answer I give, which is, yep, it's unfair, live with it. And they struggle with, well, it's supposed to be fair and equitable and equal, and that's not the way life is. And the siblings really struggle with this as well, because the reality is the neurodivergent child often needs more support, more accommodations, different kinds of discipline. They have to go to therapies. They need more driving around. They need a different type of intervention in the home. And often the neurotypical sibling feels left out, feels like it's unfair, feels like they're not getting their share of the parental attention. So I'd really like to talk today about what that feels like in the family and how we can address some tips and strategies for helping families deal with this. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting in my household because, right, all three of my kids have various neurodevelopmental disorders and other diagnoses. So but there is kind of an ebb and flow to who has the most needs at one given time, right? I've always said as long as there's only one in crisis at a time, then I can manage. As soon as there's two, it's a problem.
Roller coaster.
Because there's just only so much of me that can go around. But yeah, I mean, they all three of mine still do have differing needs, and we do run into this issue of, you know, he gets treated differently, or he doesn't ever get in trouble for the things that I get in trouble for. I would never have been allowed to do that,
Yes.
and those kinds of differences, which all parents face. I think, we parent differently with our first child than we do our other kids. And so it's not a new to parenting, but it just definitely comes with a different level and a different flavor when your kids have higher needs.
So I think the first thing we have to understand is that it is unfair to some of our children that some of our other children have higher support needs.
Right.
This is reality, and we have to stop having the expectation that we treat all of our children the same. There's a wonderful graphic that a lot of people use about equality versus equity, where, they have a wall, you're supposed to be looking through the holes, and all the kids are different heights, and not all of them can see through the holes in the wall. And that's supposed to be equality, but then not everybody gets access. And right, equity is some kids get a soapbox to stand on so that they can see through the hole that's above their head.
Right.
This is exactly the same when we're talking about siblings, either who have different levels of needs, like your three, and then my two children. We didn't even realize that our second child wasn't neurotypical until he was 9 or 10 years old. We had overlooked his needs because our first child was so intensively needy. She had multiple disability labels, and we really thought our second child was just sort of reacting to how much attention she needed.
Yeah, we ran into that a little bit with one of ours too, because his similar diagnoses but present so radically different.
Exactly.
Comparison between how intense it was the first 5 years, of my oldest life, and then the difference it was in the younger one. He didn't fall through the cracks as long as I think he maybe would have in another family, just because of the knowledge that my husband and I have. We were able to identify it, even though it looked so, so different. And I think that does happen a lot with, if you have one kid that has much higher needs, it makes what would be not typical in a, I don't want to say normal, in another family, in a typical family.
Typical.
I know, it's just like, I feel like I'm saying typical and atypical a lot.
But that normal is a setting on the dryer.
Right. I know it's not something that I use in my. I was just like, can I come up with a different word than typical? Because I feel like I've said it 700 times in this sentence. But yeah, it's something I think that other families deal with. If you've got one who has a lot higher needs, is that other kid looks more typical, and you don't know any different, right? If I had a neurotypical kid first and then one with challenges, then you can see the difference. But when all your kids are got stuff going on, you kind of lose that sense of what is typical.
I have apologized to my son, my second child, about overlooking his needs for so many years, because relatively speaking, he looked typical to me.
Right.
Because his first diagnosis was anxiety disorder with panic attacks. And I really didn't notice till he was about 10 years old. And we didn't get his ADHD formally diagnosed until he was 17, even though I got him an executive functioning coach when he was 15, because he was having so much trouble functioning in school. I just have apologized to him so many times about overlooking his needs, because his sister was so much more intensively needy. And he has forgiven me, he assures me. But here's one of the issues. We want to be able to say to our children, we see you, we understand who you are, and yet our other child or children need more of our time and attention. So how do we balance this and not feel that we have overlooked either our less needy child relatively speaking, or a neurotypical child? And how do we help them grow up with good self-esteem and self-confidence and grow up to be a healthy person when we have this other child who has much more severe needs? And that's
Sure.
what I really want to address today, because I think it's really important that we think about how to support the other sibling. We spend all our time in this podcast, Nicole, talking about our neurodivergent children. I
Right.
really want to spend this one talking about the siblings.
I love
And
it.
I think all too often, many families unintentionally ignore that other child. They assume they're getting along because they're not coming back to them. They're either a girl who is, withdrawn and hiding and not acting out, or they're a boy who is, getting along, getting average grades, and not making a fight or a fuss. And yet they have social emotional needs just like every neurotypical child does. If we had a family of all neurotypical kids, we would be doing things to support their personal growth, their emotional growth, their self-esteem and self-confidence. And when we have a neurodivergent child who has higher needs, we somehow forget that our less needy child or our neurotypical child still has the normal needs that every child does. Our lens gets skewed. We've talked before about our expectations. I have explained in earlier podcasts, and I'll take a minute to explain it now, Dr. Ross Green's approach, where he talks about the lens change. You go to the eye doctor, if you have glasses or contacts, they bring up that big machine in front of your face and they say, which one is clearer, lens 1 or lens 2, lens 3 or lens 4? I wear trifocals. So sometimes I get up to lens 7 or 8, 9 or 10 before I can see clearly. And if you think about those lenses as the way we look at our children, right? Lens 3 could be, is our child, being able to keep up with their responsibilities? And lens 4 could be, are you nagging and fighting with your child and not being able to problem solve? And lens 5 is, I've been fighting with my partner about something, and then I snap at my child, who maybe really didn't do anything wrong, but just asked a question at the wrong time.
Sure.
And so lenses are our expectations of what our children should be able to do and accomplish. And if our expectations are unreasonable, we may be putting pressure on our child to behave in a way that they cannot do. And that includes our neurotypical child, our moderately needy child, and our high needs child. And by changing our lenses or our expectations, we're able to support our children more effectively. What do you think?
I love it. I think, it is a problem that will show up is the kids who are doing well will maybe not tell you when they're struggling, right? Because they don't want to add to your burden because they can see what's going on. They know how hard you're working. They know how hard things are in the family. And so I think we need to be really intentional about checking in with all of our kids and being able to recognize when something might not quite be right and carving out that time for them. It's hard, especially for me with my own ADHD, right? Like the thing that feels the most urgent is the thing that gets the attention, right? It's tricky to build in time intentionally to do the other things. That's why all of like the day-to-day things get lost on the wayside in my household, right? Because it's not emergent. And so I think we have to be really careful that we're not only paying attention to the emergent thing, but that we're maintaining those other things And I mean, it's something we've talked about when we talk about taking care of ourselves as parents of these kids, right? That we have to take that time
Yes.
for ourselves and put on our own oxygen mask first so that we can do what we need to do for our kids. But we also need to build into that time with the kids who are the less squeaky wheels of the day.
I like that, less squeaky wheels. And I want to mention how this impacts the sibling relationships. We want the
Yeah.
siblings to have close relationships too. We
Mm-hmm.
don't want sibling rivalry, and we don't want resentment between the siblings. We want them to be able to support each other. In many of our families, the more typical child may be needed to support our more neurodivergent child when we're older or gone. And that can feel like a lot of pressure on
Right.
the neurotypical child if that's all we talk about. My son knows, we have had that conversation with him as an adult, that he may need to care for our older child who has multiple disabilities and is currently unable to work because of those disabilities when we're older and after we pass away. He knows he's going to have to do that. But we've also worked really hard on their relationship. So I want to
Yeah.
say a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate. They're 4 years apart. My daughter is 4 years older. And we worked very hard on helping the two of them have a positive relationship. And we did that by including both of them in activities together as much as possible. We helped them play together. We supported them in playing together. And we also did things for each of them. So whenever we spent time supporting our daughter, she was in so many kinds of therapies, physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy. And then we always made sure to spend one-on-one time as much as possible with our son. So we had mommy son time and daddy son time so that we showed him as much love and affection and individual attention as possible, given the needs of our daughter. And
Right.
so if one of us was with one kid, the other one would we arranged activities and play dates. We had this thing. My son started Taekwondo at age 6. It became our special activity because he did it twice a week. We went out to eat together. And then he went to his lesson and we had time together twice a week doing this. It was our special time. We did it till he was 12 years old and finished his black belt. And he still talks about it. It was our
Mm-hmm.
special time together that we went and did. And his father took him to fly remote controlled airplanes, which was my husband's hobby as a teen himself. And then they would go to the airport and park and watch the planes take off. So we had special activities that we did with our son that we didn't do with our daughter that created special relationships and closeness.
Mm-hmm.
And so my son and I also share an interest in exotic cars. Maseratis and Lamborghinis and Rolls Royces and Bentleys, and we would look for them on the road and talk about them, and we'd watch videos about them. And this was our special thing together. And so we created special time and special interests with our son that we didn't do with our daughter, that created a special individual relationship that helped him feel that we had love for him, that we had a special bond, that we made time specially for him. And that helped him feel that not only that we loved him, but that we had a special place in our heart for him and
Mm-hmm.
helped him feel special as well, built up his self-confidence and his self-esteem. And especially when he started having problems in school, in 4th, 5th grade, and then in middle school, he could come to us. When he started having panic attacks, I was his go-to person. He felt completely safe sharing with me because we had spent all of his life building up those personal, special relationships. And because of that, he has used me as his safe person, his go-to person. At 26, he hugs and kisses me. We crawl into bed together and he shares with me how he's feeling and talking to me about his life. It's a very special relationship. And it's because from the time he was born, knowing that our daughter, who has very serious disabilities, multiple disability labels, we carved out special space for him.
Mm-hmm.
And we supported their relationship. Since a very young age, they played games together, just the two of them. We encouraged that. We took time to help them learn how to be together. And we took time to teach him how to work with her and how to play with her, giving her needs.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I was going to bring up next is, as we're working to understand how our kiddos work, their siblings need to understand that as well. And it can go a long way to diffuse some of that resentment and some of, not only give them better ways to interact with each other, but for them to know why we're doing things a certain way.
Yes.
I have to sit with my older boys and explain to them, yeah, the way we parent your third brother is different than the way we parented you because his brain works differently. And yeah, he just is flipping out and hitting everyone, and that's not okay. But I can't go in hard right now and discipline the behavior right now. It won't do anything except escalate the situation. I have to remove him. I have to get him calm. And sometimes that might look like I'm being super nice to him when he's misbehaving. Right? But that's not what's going on. What's going on is we're calming down and then we're going to have the discussion.
I thought we were going to keep the discipline discussion for next time. So today
it's just more about explaining to them that they're going to need to interact with him differently. And
yes,
that might mean playing the game that he wants to play, even though you've played it 100 billion times, because that's where his brain is. And the purpose of it is to form that time. So teaching them how to interact and why their sibling might respond a certain way.
That's
and
the key point.
In why. The differences in how they operate and is a really important piece to them having that positive relationship and, getting rid of some of that resentment if they know why.
That I think is super important. Families have very mixed thoughts about what to share with siblings about the neurodivergent child. I work with a lot of families over the years who don't even like to tell the neurodivergent child about their own diagnoses, much less tell the siblings.
Sure.
And I think that's a mistake.
I think absolutely if you
don't identify, then they begin to label, the neurodivergent child begins to label themselves as weird or stupid or, a problem. And
I'm just the bad kid. I can never do things right.
And I think the siblings start to feel the same way.
Right.
My sibling is stupid and weird and have all kinds of negative connotations. I really believe in telling our children in their own developmental level as early as possible, like when you get the diagnoses and they have some language about it, what's going on with them so that they understand that their brains work differently and that they're capable of achieving their goals. They're capable of being successful with the proper supports and accommodations.
Right.
And then you have to teach their siblings the same thing. Your sister or brother has different ways of thinking or working through problems, but they're capable of being successful. And here's how you can support your sibling. And I think that's really important for their sibling relationship, because
Absolutely.
then when there's problems, you can enlist the support of the healthier sibling. You can say, could you please get me the pillow I need? Can you please turn out the lights because your sibling is overstimulated right now? I think it's so important, again, in a developmentally supportive way, that's appropriate to the age of the neurotypical or less needy sibling, to give them appropriate ways to interact with the neurodivergent sibling. It's so important to help them be engaged, because this is a family support system.
Right.
And this is one of the lens changes I talk to my clients about. This is not, my husband's mother had schizophrenia, and she became very ill when my husband was like 6 months old. And so their way of handling it was to send the children away to grandmother and sort of handle mother on their
Right.
own. And so there was a real sense that mother was, sick and dangerous and horrible,
Sure.
And this was also part of the function of the time,
Right.
50s and 60s.
I mean, I'm surprised they didn't send mom away and she just disappeared and
Exactly.
never
They didn't
came back.
even really send her to doctors. They sort of kept her at home, and
Mhm.
it was a different time. And she did
Yeah.
later in life get appropriate psychiatric care. She was able to travel on her own from New York to Denver to come visit us. And as an adult, my husband was able to create a relationship with her, and it was very heartwarming, right?
That's great. I
So
mean, we didn't know as much then as we know now, and
exactly.
thank goodness we
So,
can repair some of the
in the
damage that was
80s
done.
and 90s, when we lived here in Colorado, she was able to visit, and he was able to create a relationship with her at the end of her life, because she was being appropriately treated, and it was very gratifying. But
Mhm.
what families need to learn from this is that we can help the siblings create relationships by including the less impacted sibling or neurotypical sibling in appropriate ways.
Yeah.
So we helped the younger sibling. He's 4 years younger. So when he was old enough, he would, if our daughter was having sensory overload, he could turn off the lights. We could ask him to speak in a quieter voice. We could say, sister. He called her Sissy, because he couldn't say her name at the time. Sissy needs some quiet now. Could you play in your room? And then we would go in and play with him when she was calmer. If she was having overload, he could help us take toys to her room for her. We always try to engage him in an age appropriate way.
Mhm.
And what that developed into, so she had 2 friends. From the time he was even a baby, they would treat him as a doll and dress him up. It was adorable. And so there's these 3 girls, all within 1 year of age, who all had some level of needs, but and they would take the baby, who was 4 years younger, and they would dress him up and use him as a toy. And he thought that was wonderful, because he had their full attention,
Right.
and they would play with him like he was a doll. And they dress him up. It didn't matter if it was girl dress up clothes or boy dress up clothes. So they all had princess clothes. I ended up buying him race driver costumes and fireman costumes, and some boy costumes. And they would just treat him as a toy. And Aviva would play My daughter would play veterinarian, and she'd be the doctor, and he'd bring in the stuffed animals and check things off on the. So we really try to engage them in age-appropriate play where he could play a role with her. And then
So I have a question on that.
Yes.
So that was a lot, easier for us to do when all the kids were little. But there is a, let's see, 7-year age gap between my oldest and my youngest. So, he's going to be 17 this week, and his little brother.
Wow, is he really that old already?
I know.
I've known you so long. Oh my God.
I know. Yeah, he'll be 17 this week. Wild. Gonna be a senior in high school.
I've known you 5 years already.
So amazingly well. It's just like, I can't talk about it. I cry. But the problem is trying to, create those, I guess maybe, like we're doing okay with that, but I imagine there are other families that are in similar places where when the kids are in different stages of life, how do they find ways to have that same kind of interaction, or even, when they get to be teenagers or whatnot, when the interest levels are very, very different?
It's a really good question. So what changed over time is both my kids are interested in science and math. So they would watch YouTube videos together of YouTubers who did stuff about science and math. That got to be, so my kids are 4 years apart. Mm-hmm. And because they had this shared interest in science and math, they found YouTubers they both would watch and discuss together. So it went from play to a shared adult interest. And of course, we encouraged that. My daughter has a BA in biology and then went to culinary school. My son has a BA in aerospace engineering. So in high school, they found a mutual interest in science and math, and they watch YouTube together. It just progressed in that they had these shared interests. But my son did sports, lacrosse and ice hockey. My daughter was a theater kid. Mm-hmm. So they had no other mutual interests except science and math. So we just encouraged that.
Yeah.
And we taught, as my daughter developed more severe symptoms, we taught our son how to support her. So she has developed some more severe neurological symptoms that require more direct support. And we taught him how to help us with that. And so he has become part of her caretaking team. And so we had to do both things. They share mutual interests. We went away this week, my husband and she went to his house for dinner one night. And we know that if she had a crisis, she could call him and he would come help take care of her. Mm-hmm. And as an adult, he knows he's learned how to help take care of her because we're aging and he will have to step in when we're no longer able to take care of her. So we have had to teach him caretaking skills.
So, question, do you know of any good resources for parents who are to help explain to their child and to the sibling kind of what's going on with things like ADHD and autism? Are there good book series or videos that you're aware of?
So my best recommendation all the time for these kinds of things is siblingsupport.org. Don Myers, Meyers, has written books. He has this amazing website starting for younger siblings. There are resources for the parents, and there's a whole section for the neurotypical sibling to talk about their needs. There's support groups run all over the country. I'm sure there are in Utah, but I know who runs them in Denver. Right. For chat rooms and support groups for the neurotypical sibling. and
Something
stuff
we
that,
are talking about doing at our clinic
well, I would connect
over
with
the next little while.
siblingsupport.org,
Okay.
and you don't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Use the proven materials.
Yes.
I'm huge on that. Don't reinvent what's already out there that
Absolutely.
is proven to work. So connect with siblingsupport.org, get their materials, become part of their network. Use what's proven to work.
Yeah.
Their stuff is amazing. I've been recommending it for years. The chat rooms they have on the website for the neurotypical sibling or the less involved sibling are fabulous. I highly recommend it. They have a book for parents. Wonderful materials. Wonderful. And it's all
Fabulous.
about how to help the siblings of the needier child.
Great.
It's wonderful stuff, and I just can't recommend it more highly. And the thing is, this network has grown over the last 20 years. They're constantly updating it. They do trainings, and they have this national network of support groups.
Awesome.
What's really important here is that parents not feel guilty. I want to make sure I brought that word into the conversation here.
Mm-hmm.
We feel guilty all the time.
Parents feel guilty
we had
all the time.
Yeah. First, that we had the kid who is neurodivergent, then that we can't give enough to the other kids because our neurodivergent kid needs us to take them to therapies, get IEPs, spend all this time at the school, handle, all the issues in the home. And we don't want our other child to feel left out or hurt or not cared about. But this is what we're talking about today.
There all come a time where you hear that from one of your kids. I remember hearing it a few years ago. One of my kids, I was trying hard to connect with him and I was feeling like things weren't going. And he, expressed that he felt like I loved his little brother more than him. Because whenever the little brother got home from school, I was a big deal. Oh, how was your day? It's so good to see you, And he's like, well, you don't do that with me. And I was like, oh, you're a teenager. I didn't know you wanted that. I always ask you how your day was. And you go, I didn't know. I was like, well,
what did you do today? I don't know.
I'm so excited when he gets home. And it was like, wow, I did not realize you were feeling that way. I'm going to make a big old deal whenever you walk in the house,
So parents feel guilt. I think it's part of the territory.
Yeah.
But we feel more guilt when we have a neurodivergent child. Because first we had that child and was it our fault?
Right.
That's a subject for a whole nother podcast.
Right.
But guilt because, can we fix that child? Are we doing enough for that child?
Right.
And then we feel guilt because we're not doing enough for our neurotypical or less needy child. And I started out saying, I want to come back to it, it's not fair. Get used to it.
Right.
It's not going to be fair. And your neurotypical or less needy child is going to tell you all the time, it's not fair. You spend more time with the other kid. And reality is, it's not fair.
And I think sometimes, we try and be like, it's because that instead of just validating what our kid is saying, yeah, you're right. It's not fair. And you're right. This one gets treated differently than you do. And there's reasons for that. And I need you to trust me. And it's not because I love you less. It's not fair. It's not always going to be fair. And there you go. I'm doing the best I can. And trust me, I don't always get it right.
And I would take a completely different approach.
Okay.
Right? Because what you're doing is justifying your actions.
No, just validating their concerns.
No, that's not validating.
You are right. It is that way. And let's see what we can do to make you feel better about it.
That's not what you just said.
Okay.
What you just said was justifying because you said, I have to spend more time with the other kid and it isn't fair and they have more needs. That's justifying your actions out of guilt. The second time you said, let's see what we can do to help you with that. That's validating.
Well, it's part of the same discussion when I have with
not.
Give me a second. When your kid comes to you with this concern of it's not fair, you can say, yes, this isn't fair, and this isn't fair, and this isn't fair, and this isn't fair. I am validating what you're saying to me. You are right that it's not fair.
That's not what validation
And then,
means. That's not what validation means. That's justifying and defending your actions by telling them, yes, you're right, because. That's not validation. Validation is saying, I understand what you're saying, even if there's all these conditions. Leave out the conditions. Don't defend your actions. Validation is saying,
I'm just talking about reflecting what they're saying to me. If they come and say, it's not fair that you do this, then I would say, yeah, you're right. That's happening.
But that's not validation. Validation is saying to them, you have these needs, and I recognize that I'm not meeting your needs. You don't have to give the reasons. That's justification. I'm really going to push you on this one. Validation is saying, you're right. I'm not meeting your needs without giving any justification or defense.
So I don't see it that I'm defending when they're.
I know you don't.
I'll give a more specific example. It's going into kind of the discipline thing. So
no, don't go into discipline. Don't talk about discipline. That's justification too. I know this is really hard. That's why we work on it with parents so much. You want to say, but, here's all.
No, but it's not that I'm saying, but, it's, I'm saying, yes, what you're saying is like, what you're feeling is valid.
But you don't say that by repeating the reasons why you're doing what you're doing.
I'm not repeating I'm repeating what they're saying to me. You don't do this with that kid. You're right. I don't do that with that kid. And it's not fair.
Mm-hmm. And that's not what you said.
Because the opposite of that would be defending it, being like, no, I don't do that. You are feeling, what you're feeling isn't real.
It's a very fine line. But validation is saying, I understand how you're feeling without giving back the reasons of why you're behaving the way you're behaving. So it's saying, yes, you're right. You're feeling left out. I'm not giving you the time you need, without reviewing the reasons why you have to be with the other kid.
So at what point then are we
informing
them of what's going on?
It's very counterintuitive. They know what's going on. You don't have to review the reasons. They live in your house.
They don't know. I mean, they're not here all day. Like, my kids are at school. They come, they see a little window of things, and then they'll bring something up.
They know exactly what's going on. They're not stupid.
No,
they know exactly what's going on.
I am not the most socially aware.
That's okay. Validation is saying, I understand why you're feeling the way you do, period.
Okay.
Right? So I understand your feeling that I'm not spending enough time with you. I'm not giving you enough attention, and you want more of that. Period.
Okay.
That's it.
But we just talked, about educating. So
that's
at what point
does that come in? That's not validation. That has nothing to do with validation. That's an entirely different part of the conversation. So validation is simply saying, I understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and have a conversation about their feelings, listening as carefully as you can. Education is an entirely different conversation.
Sure. Just not the conversations tend to happen at the
not
same
a part of the same
time.
Conversation. Not part of the same conversation. So education happens when maybe there's a situation coming up and you say to the child, I could really use your help right now. The other kid is having some sensory overload. And when this happens, it really helps if it's quiet and the lights are down. Would you mind turning off the lights and helping me get the kid into their room, or helping me by getting some pillows. Thank you for your help. Look how much this is helping, sister or brother. That's education. It's not part of validation. Validation is simply listening to your kids' feelings and repeating them back to them so they feel listened to and understood. Entirely different thing. Two separate conversations. Can't happen at the same time. When they want validation, they don't want to be educated. They just want to know that you listened to their feelings, understood them, and reflected them back. That's a validation conversation.
But then you said when I'm reflecting it back to them that I'm justifying.
Because you've reflected back behavior, not feelings. Only reflect back the feelings. Validation is about feelings, not behavior. Reflect back their feelings. You're feeling hurt because I'm not spending time with you. You're feeling sad because you feel like I'm leaving you out. You're not talking about the other kid's behavior. You're only talking about the kid you're validating. Don't talk about the other kid at all.
So maybe this is just a conversation we need to revisit when we talk about the discipline issues, because that is where the conversation comes up a lot with one of my kids in particular.
That's an education.
It's not fair. It's not fair, this, that, and the other, because he does this and you do that.
That's not a validation conversation. A validation conversation is just about feelings. I'm feeling hurt because you're spending more time with the other kid than me. You're feeling hurt because you feel like I don't spend enough time with you. You're always with brother. So you're feeling hurt that I don't spend enough time with you. Validation is about feelings and only about that kid.
Sure. I guess that particular flavor of it, we don't have as often. And
it's the most important conversation you can have with that kid.
Well, and I feel like that's one thing I'm pretty good at. I do spend a lot of time with all of my kids and very involved in all of their activities and supporting
them. You are. I see your posts all the time. You are amazing, Nicole.
Sometimes to the point that they are like, will you go away already and not be at every single thing I do? And I say, no.
That was what, I took my daughter to all her theater things. We went to every show. I took my son to every lacrosse practice and ice hockey practice and every tournament and every game.
Some of it I think is, it's obviously about them, but a lot of it is about me. I know that I have a limited amount of time with these kids. There are so many things that they struggle with and that I have witnessed and worked through struggle with and watched them be sad and hurt and not being able to fix it, that when they are doing something that they love and it makes them happy, I want to sit there and watch them do it. Even if I'm just sitting in a camp chair watching them at band practice all day long, I love to watch my kids doing the things that they enjoy in the places where they're successful, and I will not miss a minute of it. And so I end up overly involved, and I end up on the marching band boosters, being in charge of fundraising and uniforms, and I'm at every single competition, and I travel with them all the time, and maybe they would like to have a little space, but they're not getting it.
We can talk about that another time.
They can have space when they move out of my house, but until then.
But this also is part of the conversation about how we can't have equality between our kids, but we can have equity. And equity is giving each of our kids what they need to show our love and affection for them. Right. And so if my daughter needs more time being taken to therapies, then my son needs my time taking him first to Taekwondo and then lacrosse and ice hockey, because that's where he needs my presence. And that's how I show him that I love him just as much as I love my daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the conversation we have all the time at schools when we're advocating for kids. Well, that's not fair. I've got, I remember specifically being in a eligibility meeting for my 8th grader, and there was a math teacher. And, my son doesn't fit well in the boxes. He's very much a twice exceptional kid. The services that he needed were not typical middle school special ed services. We were inventing what he needed, and it was very much not what they were used to providing at this middle school level. And their math teacher in there was like, well, I have 100 kids who are like that. I know a ton of kids who would benefit from that. And I remember looking at the teacher and saying, well, then their parents should request an evaluation. But we're talking about this kid and what this kid needs. And we have that conversation with teachers. We have that conversation with other students, right? It's not fair if they get to have this that I don't have. And, we just use the example of, okay, well, you need glasses. This person doesn't need glasses. Well, it's not fair that they get glasses and you don't. So should we give you glasses, or should we take his glasses away so that it's fair for everyone? Well, that's not fair for either, because if we give you his glasses, you won't be able to see. If we take his away, he can't see. Everyone deserves to be able to see. So it's something that's important for all of our kids to understand, right? Is that fair doesn't mean everyone gets the same. Fair means everyone gets what they need when they need it.
Yes.
And then at the same time, making sure that we're meeting those needs of the kids who are the less squeaky wheels.
Yes. And it's also about relationships. So we want to have really good relationships with all our children, despite what their needs are. And we want the siblings to have good relationships, because we want them to be able to depend on each other when we're not there to help them.
Right.
I think that's the biggest message I want people to take away from this talk today, that those sibling relationships and the parent-child relationships are equally important. And there are things like we've talked about today, all the suggestions we've made, there are absolutely things you can do to help.
Well, and I think, that's another thing that we start to feel some guilt about as parents, is that, this kid shouldn't have to be in the position where they are going
dirty
to
word. We don't say should. We don't say should.
I know. That's why I'm saying it's something that we feel guilty about when we should not feel guilty about it, is this idea that, that we are now putting a burden on another one of our kids, that they're going to have to be a caretaker, and that's not fair. And it's not.
Nope.
Like I said, it's reality. Not fair, but it is real. And we can foster that and let our kids rise to the occasion. It will make them better people. But it isn't fair. And it's another layer of that guilt that we feel, oh, now not only have I created this child that has all these needs, and that's not fair to them, but now I'm placing undue burden on another one of my kids who might have to grow up a little faster or take on more responsibility, and then be more responsible later when I'm not able to.
Right. It's hard. It's always a hard decision. And again, I think that's a conversation we can go into more deeply another time. But I think the really important message from today is get support for that other sibling.
Right.
Siblingsupport.org is my constant recommendation for this. There are other groups that do it, but I believe they're the best. And pay attention to that other sibling or siblings by giving them individual time. Give validation, which means talking about their feelings and nothing else, and help build their self-esteem and self-confidence. It's really the 3 biggest things I want to say about that.
Yeah. And then just to wrap up, I'd give maybe a couple of other examples of things that we've done to kind of help with that. One is kind of a nightly check-in. I go into each of my kids' bedrooms when they're like getting ready for bed, and we just sit down and we just have a few minutes to talk. And sometimes it's just, what's going on at school? What can I help you with? But it gives an opportunity for those conversations to happen in a set aside time. And it doesn't happen every night, but I do my best to kind of check in with, especially my older kids. I wait up for them to get home on the weekends, and they're usually pretty talkative at that point, whether because they've had a good time and also their, ADHD medications are wearing off. So they're more open with the conversations. We have a lot of good conversations at 11 o'clock. I'm tired, but it's important that we kind of just chat about how things are going for them.
I want to share that as part of an exercise I had to do this past week, I asked my family what they appreciate most about me. And both my kids said that what they most appreciated is I understood what they were going through and I could help them with it.
Yeah.
I mean, tears instantly.
Right? Like I did it. Yeah. So seeking that understanding, doing our part as parents to, read the books and talk to the therapists and
get the help,
get all the help that we can so that we're in a place to provide that kind of support. And we'll fail, we'll make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
We won't get everything right.
I've yelled more than I ever wanted to. And I should know better, right? There's the should. I ought to know better. I'm the professional in the field, and I still yelled at my kids.
Doesn't matter. It's different when it's your own situation and your own family and the end of your own busy day. We're all humans. We're going to make mistakes. The way we handle those mistakes and the way we show our kids what to do next is really important.
Yeah.
All right. We are at the end of our time. Do you want to give a little pitch, let people know where they can find you?
Yes, my website is drsusanblumberg.com. You can schedule a free consultation with me to talk about my coaching and how I can help your teen and young adult be ready to move into the next stage of their lives at callcoachsusan.com. I have a big free workshop coming up in August. I'd love to talk with you all about that.
Talk more about that here so you can get people signed up. But thanks for being here. If you have any questions, comments, if you need resources, put them here in the comments. We will, work to address any questions that we have in future streams. We are going to talk more about the sibling thing and how it relates to other parts of parenting, including discipline issues, next time. And then coming up in a few weeks, as we approach going back to school, we want to talk about some back to school strategies and talk about kind of our favorite planners and systems to help your kids as they get back to school. So that's our plan.
My favorite subject.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
And yeah, we will
Thank
see
you
all
as always, Nicole. A great
Have-
conversation.
Always. Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. This video is not a substitute for counseling, psychotherapy, medical, or mental health care. The information and advice shared here should not be used in place of any form of diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Information provided here does not involve diagnosis or treatment of medical or mental or psychological disorders. If you feel the need for professional support, please seek a local professional in your area. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only.